There is something almost magical about two wheels in a line. Think about it for a moment. One wheel on its own falls over the instant you let go. And yet place two of them one behind the other, give them just a little forward motion, and somehow, they balance. They hold. They glide. People have been quietly marveling at that for a very long time. This is the story of how the bicycle came to be. It is a long story and a gentle one, and it wanders through workshops and country lanes and cobblestone streets and wide open parks. There is no hurry. The best thing about a slow ride is that you can notice everything as you pass. So, let us begin at the beginning, which was not, as you might think, with pedals. A long, long time ago, more than 200 years now, there were no bicycles anywhere in the world. Not one. There were horses, of course, and carriages pulled by horses, and people walking on their own 2 feet, as people had always done. Getting from one place to another was slow and often tiring, and the roads were not particularly pleasant. They were muddy in winter and dusty in summer, full of ruts and stones, and if you wanted to go anywhere that was more than a short walk away, you either had a horse or you asked someone who did. Most people did not have horses. Horses were expensive. They needed feeding every single day, which cost money, and they needed stables. And they got sick sometimes, and all of that cost money too. So for most ordinary people, the answer to, "How do I get somewhere?" was simply, "I walk." And then, in the year 1817, something rather wonderful happened. In a part of Germany called Baden, which is a gentle, forested, rather beautiful part of the world, a man named Karl von Drais had an idea. Karl was thoughtful and inventive, the kind of person who looked at problems and wondered if there might be a simpler answer than everyone assumed. And the problem he was thinking about on this particular occasion was the horse. That year, 1817, had been an unusually difficult one. The year before, a volcano far away on the other side of the world had erupted so violently that it had sent enormous clouds of ash and dust up into the sky. So much dust that it drifted all the way around the globe and blocked out some of the sunlight. The harvest that followed was poor. Food was scarce. And horses, which need to eat a great deal of grain, were expensive to keep. Karl von Drais looked at all of this and thought, what if a person could travel at the speed of a horse, but without needing a horse at all? What if the person themselves could be the engine? What he built was not quite a bicycle. Not yet. but it was the first whisper of one. He called it, in German, the Laufmaschine, which means simply the running machine. In French, it became the Draisienne. In English, people called it the hobby horse, or the dandy horse, or sometimes the pedestrian curricle, which is rather a magnificent name when you say it slowly. The pedestrian curricle. It was made mostly of wood, 2 wheels, one in front of one behind, just like a bicycle. A padded seat in the middle and a bar to steer with at the front. But there were no pedals, no chain, nothing to push with your feet except the ground itself. You sat on the seat and you walked. Or rather, you strode. You pushed yourself along with big walking steps, one foot then the other, and here is the wonderful part. You lifted both feet off the ground and you glided. Just for a moment. Just for as long as the forward motion carried you. And then you put your feet down again, and strode again, and lifted, and glided. Can you imagine what that must have felt like the very first time? The ground floating away beneath you, the wheels holding you steady, the air moving just a little against your face. It must have seemed like something from a dream. Carl von Drace took his machine out on a summer's day in 1817 and rode it 14 miles in under an hour. 14 miles. On a wooden hobby horse with no pedals, pushing himself with his own 2 feet. That was faster than a horse could comfortably trot for any length of time. People were astonished. The news spread, as good news tends to. Before long, craftsmen in France and England were building their own versions of the machine. A man in London named Dennis Johnson made a particularly elegant one. He curved the frame so that it sat lower, more gracefully, and he advertised it in the newspapers and set up a riding school in a building near Piccadilly, where people could come and learn how to balance on the thing. And people came. Quite a lot of people. For a season or two, the hobby horse was tremendously fashionable. Young men in fashionable clothes swooped and glided along the paths of the parks, and people gathered to watch, and everyone agreed it was very impressive. There were, it must be said, a few difficulties. The roads were not made for this sort of thing. Most roads were cobblestones or packed dirt, and sitting on a rigid wooden seat, rolling over cobblestones on wooden wheels, was rather like sitting on a fence and being bumped repeatedly by someone enthusiastic. Everything rattled. Everything shook. Your hands went numb from gripping the steering bar, and other parts of you went numb from the seat, and by the end of a journey of any length, you felt as though you had been very thoroughly shaken. And there was another problem. If you were riding along a footpath, which was where most people rode these machines because the road itself was worse, You were in the way of the people walking. And the people walking did not always appreciate having a gliding wooden contraption come swooping up behind them. In some cities, the hobby horse was actually banned from footpaths. The riders were rather put out by this. And so, after a few years of excitement, the craze faded. The machines went to the back of sheds and understairs. The riding schools closed. And, for a generation or more, the hobby horse was mostly forgotten. But the idea did not disappear. Ideas like that very rarely do. The wheel kept turning, you might say, slowly, quietly. And then, in France, sometime in the 1860s, something changed. The story of exactly how it happened is a little uncertain. History is like that sometimes, full of gaps and disagreements. But somewhere in or near Paris, a man named Pierre Michaud, who made carriages and repaired them, had a machine brought in for repair. One of the old hobby horses, perhaps, or something like it. And as he or his son, or possibly one of the men who worked for him, looked at it, someone had a thought. What if there were pedals on the front wheel? Not pedals on the ground. Pedals attached directly to the axle of the front wheel. You would put your feet on them and turn them round and round, and the wheel would turn with them, and you would move forward. It sounds obvious now. It probably sounds so obvious that you wonder why it took 40 years for anyone to think of it. But that is the way with ideas. They arrive when they arrive, not a moment sooner. And when they do arrive, everyone looks at them and says, well, of course, obviously, why didn't anyone think of that before? Someone fitted the pedals, and someone climbed on and pushed, and the wheels turned. And the machine moved forward on its own, without the rider touching the ground at all. This new machine was called the velocipede, which is a Latin sort of word meaning fast foot, more or less. It was also called, by the people who had to ride it on the roads of Paris, the bone shaker. The bone shaker. The bone shaker. You can probably guess why. The roads were cobblestones. The wheels were still iron or wood. The seat was still rather hard. And now the rider's feet were up off the ground and attached to the front axle, so every single judder and knock went straight up through the pedals and through the seat and into the rider's bones. It was tremendously effective at getting from one place to another. It was also tremendously effective at rattling every tooth in your head. Still, people rode it. Of course they did. It was new, and it was marvelous, and it worked. Workshops in Paris began making them, and the idea spread to England and then to America, and soon velocipede clubs were forming, and people were having races on them, and everyone was very excited. But there was a problem, or rather, there were several problems, and they were all connected. The front wheel. The pedals were attached to the front wheel, which meant that every time you pushed one pedal down, you moved forward exactly as far as the wheel turned. Which sounds fine. But the wheel was, well, not very big. It was the size of a carriage wheel. Perhaps, maybe 4 feet across if you were lucky. And each full turn of that wheel only carried you forward a certain distance, which meant that, to go fast, you had to pedal very fast indeed. You had to spin your legs furiously, like someone trying to stir a very thick pudding at enormous speed. This was tiring. And it only worked up to a point. Your legs, after all, could only spin so fast. Now here is where the thinking got interesting. Several someones probably, in several different workshops, all wondering the same thing at the same time, realized something. If the wheel were bigger, each turn would carry you further. A wheel that was 5 feet tall or 6 feet tall would cover much more ground with each complete rotation than a wheel that was only 3 feet tall. And if it covered more ground per turn, you could go faster without having to pedal faster. This sounds sensible. It was sensible. It was entirely correct. The only difficulty was what it looked like. Because if you made the front wheel bigger and bigger, and you still had to sit on the seat above the axle, then the seat got higher and higher off the ground. And at some point, if the front wheel was, say, 5 feet tall, the seat was very high indeed. And the poor little back wheel, which did not have pedals attached to it and was really only there to stop you falling backward, was still the same small size it had always been. The result was a machine that looked absolutely extraordinary. A great, enormous wheel at the front, taller than most people. A tiny little wheel at the back, about the size of a dinner plate. And the rider, perched high up on the seat, legs spinning the pedals, sitting approximately as high off the ground as someone sitting on a very tall horse. This machine was called the ordinary bicycle. The people of the time thought it looked perfectly normal, because to them it was ordinary. It was just what a bicycle looked like. We, looking back at it now, call it by a different name. We call it the penny-farthing. Because a penny was the largest coin and a farthing was the smallest, and put one behind the other, the old coin and the tiny coin, and you have exactly the shape of that machine, one great wheel and one small wheel, side by side. Isn't that a lovely name? The penny-farthing. It sounds like something from a fairy tale. The penny-farthing was magnificent in its way. It was fast, faster than anything that had come before. The riders who were skilled at it could go very swiftly indeed, and penny-farthing racing became a serious sport, with proper tracks and proper competitions and riders who trained hard and were very good at it. But it was also, and there is really no other way to say this, quite dangerous. The seat was very high. If the front wheel hit a stone or a rut or anything unexpected in the road, the whole machine could stop very suddenly while the rider kept going, which meant that the rider flew over the front of the enormous wheel and landed headfirst on the ground. This happened with some regularity. It had a name. It was called taking a header, which is a very polite way of describing something that must have been quite alarming. Because of all this, the penny-farthing was mostly ridden by young men who were confident and athletic and not overly worried about the possibility of suddenly flying headfirst into the road. It was not a machine for everyone. It was not a machine for older people, or for people who were not especially strong, or for women, who in those days wore long skirts that would have been impossible to manage on a machine like that even if anyone had suggested they try. The penny-farthing was wonderful. But it was not quite right yet. Something was still missing. In the English city of Coventry, in the 1870s and 80s, there was a man named James Starley, who was one of the most important people in all of this story. He was a bicycle maker, a tinkerer, an improver of things. He looked at the penny-farthing and saw all the things it was good at and all the things it was not, and he and the people who worked around him began quietly trying to solve the problem. The problem was this: you wanted the speed that came from a big wheel, but you did not want the danger of sitting 6 feet above the road with your legs attached to the axle of a wheel the size of a ceiling. Could you have the speed without the danger? Could you have a machine with 2 wheels that were roughly the same size, safe, low to the ground, sensible? But that still went fast? The answer turned out to be yes. But it required a new idea. The idea was the chain. Not a chain like a fence or a necklace, a mechanical chain. A loop of metal links that could carry the turning force from one place to another. You put pedals in the middle of the bicycle, low and easy to reach, and you connected them with a chain to the back wheel. The chain ran from a small gear near the pedals to a small gear on the back wheel. And by making the gear at the pedals bigger than the gear at the back wheel, you could make the back wheel spin faster than the pedals. Just as the big penny-farthing wheel had gone fast with each turn. You got the speed, but the pedals stayed low. The seat stayed low. Both wheels stayed the same reasonable size. And if the front wheel hit something and stopped, you did not fly over it. You simply stopped. James Starley's nephew, John Kemp Starley, built one of these machines in 1885. He called it the Rover Safety Bicycle. The name tells you everything about why it mattered. Safety. That was the point. That was what it offered, that the penny farthing never could. People looked at it and immediately understood. Here, at last, was a bicycle that almost anyone could ride. But wait. There was still the cobblestones problem. The rattling. The bone shaking. The Rover safety bicycle was better in almost every way. But it still had solid rubber tires, or sometimes metal ones, and the roads were still full of stones and ruts and all the other things roads were full of in those days. Riding was still, if not exactly an ordeal, at least a more vigorous experience than you might wish for. And then, in 1888, a Scottish veterinarian named John Boyd Dunlop made a discovery that changed everything. Dunlop had a son who liked to ride his tricycle, and the roads near their home were not kind to the solid rubber wheels. The boy found it bumpy and unpleasant. Dunlop, being the sort of person who liked to solve problems, began experimenting. He wondered, what if the tire were not solid? What if it were hollow, a tube of rubber, and you filled it with air? Air is soft. Air gives way and springs back. Air absorbs the shock of a stone or a bump and cushions it before it travels up through the wheel and into the rider. He made a tube of rubber. He filled it with air. He fitted it to his son's tricycle. His son rode over the road, and it was smooth, wonderfully, remarkably smooth. The pneumatic tire. Pneumatic means air-filled. Was not entirely a new idea. Someone had patented something similar decades earlier, but the idea had been forgotten. Dunlop arrived at it again on his own, and this time it stuck. Within a few years, almost every bicycle had pneumatic tires. The cobblestones were still cobblestones, but it no longer mattered quite so much. The air in the tires absorbed the shock. The ride was quiet and easy and comfortable in a way that would have been unimaginable to the poor people who had bounced along on the first bone shakers. And now, with the safety bicycle and the pneumatic tire together, something remarkable happened. People took to bicycles in enormous numbers. Everyone wanted one. There was a craze, a genuine craze, a wave of enthusiasm that swept across Britain and Europe and America in the 1890s like something no one had ever quite seen before. Factories opened to build them. Shops opened to sell them. Cycling clubs formed in every town and city. People went on cycling holidays, cycling picnics, cycling excursions to the countryside. Magazines were printed that were only about cycling. Songs were written about cycling. The bicycle was everywhere. And among all the people who took to the bicycle with the greatest delight, with something that might almost be called relief. were women. This was very important, and it is worth dwelling on for a moment. For most of history, women had not had easy ways to travel independently. A woman who wanted to go somewhere on her own without a man to accompany her was quite limited in where she could go and how she could get there. But a bicycle changed that. A bicycle asked only that you could balance and pedal. It did not care whether you were a man or a woman. It carried you wherever you wanted to go, as fast as you could pedal, and it required nothing of anyone else. Women took to the safety bicycle in great numbers. And because long skirts and bicycles are not a comfortable combination, women also began to wear more practical clothes, shorter skirts, or trousers called bloomers, named after a woman called Amelia Bloomer, who had advocated for them. This caused enormous fuss and discussion, as such things often do, but the women kept cycling anyway. One American suffragist, a woman who campaigned for women to have the right to vote, wrote that the bicycle had done more for the freedom of women than almost anything else she could name. The bicycle, she said, gave women a feeling of freedom and self-reliance. It was a remarkable thing to say about a machine made of metal tubes and two rubber-tired wheels. But it was true. By the turn of the century, by the year 1900 or thereabouts, the bicycle had settled into a shape that would have been immediately recognizable to someone riding one today. Two wheels, roughly the same size, a chain connecting the pedals to the back wheel, handlebars to steer, a seat in the middle, pneumatic tires, brakes by now to slow yourself down, gears eventually to make hills easier. The basic shape has not changed in 120 years. There have been refinements, lighter materials, better gears, many different styles for many different purposes. But the essential idea, the fundamental design, is the same one that John Kemp Starley settled on in 1885, which is, in itself, a rather extraordinary thing. Most inventions keep changing. The telephone of 1876 bears almost no resemblance to the one in your pocket today. The first horseless carriages, automobiles, barely resemble the cars on the road outside. But the bicycle, once it found its right shape, stopped changing in any fundamental way. It was right. It was simply right. Two wheels, a chain, a seat, handlebars. That is all. That is the bicycle. There is something worth thinking about as this story winds toward its ending. Karl von Drais, pushing himself along on his wooden running machine through the German countryside in 1817, was not thinking about women's freedom or cycling clubs or pneumatic tires. He was thinking about horses and grain prices and how to get from one place to another without spending money he did not have. And Pierre Michaud, fitting pedals to a front wheel in a Paris workshop in the 1860s, was not thinking about the safety bicycle or the chain drive that would come 20 years later. He was thinking about this particular machine in front of him and this particular problem and whether pedals might help. And John Boyd Dunlop, watching his son bump along a rough road and wondering if there might be a softer way, was not thinking about the cycling craze that would sweep the world. He was thinking about his boy and the road and a tube of rubber and air. Inventions happen like that very often, not in one great leap, but in many small steps, each one taken by a person thinking about a particular problem on a particular day, often not knowing that the step they are taking is part of something much larger. Carl von Drass's running machine became, the bone shaker became, the penny-farthing became the safety bicycle, became the bicycle you know today. Each stage took the good things from what came before and solved one more problem. And then the air in the tires made everything smooth and quiet and easy, and suddenly the whole world wanted to ride. Imagine, if you will, a summer afternoon somewhere in the 1890s. A wide, tree-lined path. The light coming through the leaves in patches, the way it does in summer. The air is warm and smells faintly of grass and dry earth. And along the path come the cyclists. There are so many of them. Men in cloth caps and shirt sleeves, women in long skirts and sensible boots, or in the new shorter skirts that everyone is talking about. Older gentlemen riding carefully and with great dignity. Young people going rather faster than might be strictly sensible, calling to each other and laughing. A child on a small bicycle, wobbling a little but managing, working it out, finding the balance. They are all so pleased with themselves, with their machines, and with the afternoon, and with the remarkable fact that they can go wherever they like, under their own power, on two wheels and a chain and a puff of air. None of them are going very fast by the standards of the world today. None of them are going anywhere particularly important. They are just riding, just moving through the afternoon, just gliding. That glide. That old feeling, still the same as it ever was. The feet going round, the wheels turning, and then, for just a moment, just a breath, the sense that you are floating, that the ground is far below and the air is carrying you, and the whole complicated business of staying upright has sorted itself out without your needing to think about it. That is what Carl von Drass felt on his wooden horse in 1817, 200 years ago, in a German forest. That is what the first velocipede rider felt on the cobblestones of Paris. That is what every child feels the first time they manage, somehow, against all reasonable expectation, to stay upright on two wheels for more than a second or two. The glide. It has not changed. It will not change. It is the same glide it always was. The world is full of things that seem simple until you look at them closely. Two wheels in a line. They should fall over. They do not fall over. They carry you gently and reliably wherever you would like to go. All you have to do is pedal very softly and keep going, and trust the wheels to do what wheels have done for 150 years. The sun is going down somewhere probably. The light is that soft, late-day kind that makes everything look a little gold. Somewhere, there is a bicycle leaning against a wall, waiting. Somewhere, there is a road that goes wherever you might want. And the air in the tires holds its quiet breath, ready. The story of the bicycle is a long one, and it has not ended. New versions appear every decade. Bicycles made of carbon fiber, as light as a handful of twigs, and electric bicycles that give you a little help on the hills, and cargo bicycles that carry enormous loads, and folding bicycles that tuck under an arm. Carl von Drais would not recognize them probably, and yet if he sat on one, he would know exactly what it was. Two wheels. A way forward. The ground letting go. He would smile, almost certainly. He would pedal out into the afternoon and find the glide, and he would smile. There is a lovely thing about a bicycle. It belongs to everyone who rides one, rich people and poor people, children and grandparents, city people and country people. They all have the same experience of it, the same wobble, and then the same steadiness, the same moment when everything clicks into place and the wheels just carry you. One wheel falls over. Two wheels, moving forward, do not. That is all there is to it. And it is, quietly, one of the most useful and lovely things that was ever made. The workshops have gone quiet now. The cobblestones are still. The cycling clubs have hung their jerseys up for the evening. Carl von Drais is long gone, and so are Pierre Michaud and John Kemp, Starley and John Boyd Dunlop. But the things they made and thought and tinkered with are still here. Still rolling, still carrying people gently through afternoons all over the world. Somewhere right now, probably, someone is riding a bicycle. It might be in a city, between tall buildings. It might be on a country lane with hedges on either side. It might be in a flat place where the road stretches a long way and there is nothing to hear but the faint sound of the tires on the road and the wind moving a little, just a little, past your ears. And somewhere, right now, a child is learning, wobbling, almost falling, finding it again. That tipping moment, tipping, and then there, the wheels, finding themselves, the balance arriving from somewhere, the feet beginning to turn, and the glide, and the smile. 200 years from the first wooden horse in a German forest, and the smile is exactly the same.